the scuttle of the roof, he dropped 2 long strands down into the backyard, as he had done at Vincenzo's. I started to go back, but he stopped me. "Oh, that will never do," he said. "The kids will see that the wires end here. I must carry them on several houses farther, as a blind, and trust to luck that they don't see the wires leading down below." We were several houses down, still putting up wires, when the crowd came shouting back, sticky with cheap trust-made candy and black with East Side chocolate. We opened the ginger ale and forced ourselves to drink it so as to excite no suspicion, then a few minutes later descended the stairs of the tenement, coming out just above Albano's. I was wondering how Kennedy was going to get into Albano's again without exciting suspicion. He solved it neatly. "Now, Walter, do you think you could stand another dip into that red ink at Albano's?" I said I might in the interest of science and justice, not otherwise. "Well, your face is sufficiently dirty," he commented, "so that with the overalls you don't look very much as you did the first time you went in. I don't think they will recognize you. Do I look pretty good?" "You look like a coal heaver on the job," I said. I can scarcely restrain my admiration. "All right. Then take this little glass bottle. Go into the back room and order something cheap in keeping with your looks. Then, when you are all alone, break the bottle. It is full of gas drippings. Your nose will dictate what to do next. Just tell the proprietor you saw the gas company's wagon on the next block, and come up here and tell me." I entered. There was a sinister-looking man with a sort of unscrupulous intelligence writing at a table. As he wrote and puffed at his cigar, I noticed a scar on his face, a deep furrow running from the lobe of his ear to his mouth. That, I knew, was a brand set upon him by the Camorra. I sat and smoked and sipped slowly for several minutes, cursing him inwardly, more for his presence than for his evident look of the malavita. At last he went out to ask the barkeeper for a stamp. Quickly I tiptoed over to another corner of the room and ground the little bottle under my heel. Then I resumed my seat. The odor that pervaded the room was sickening. The sinister-looking man with the scar came in again and sniffed. I sniffed. Then the proprietor came in and sniffed. "Say," I said in the toughest voice I could assume, "you got a leak. Wait, I seen the gas company wagon on the next block when I came in. I'll get the man." I dashed out and hurried up the street to the place where Kennedy was waiting impatiently. Rattling his tools, he followed me with apparent reluctance. As he entered the wine shop, he snorted, after the manner of gasmen. "Where's the leak?" "You'll find it a leak," grunted Albano. "What do you get your pay for? You wanted me to do your work?" "Well, half a dozen of you wops get out of here, that's all. Do you just want to be blown to pieces with them pipes and cigarettes? Clear out," growled Kennedy. They retreated precipitately, and Craig hastily opened his bag of tools. "Quick, Walter, shut the door and hold it," exclaimed Craig, working rapidly. He unwrapped a little package and took out a round, flat, disc-like thing of black vulcanized rubber. Jumping up on a table, he fixed it to the top of the reflector over the gas jet. "Can you see that from the floor, Walter?" he asked under his breath. "No," I replied, "not even when I know it's there." Then he attached a couple of wires to it and led them across the ceiling toward the window, concealing them carefully by sticking them in the shadow of a beam. At the window he quickly attached the wires to the 2 that were dangling down from the roof and shoved them around out of sight. "We'll have to trust that no one sees them," he said. "That's the best I can do at such short notice. I never saw a room so bare as this anyway. There isn't another place I could put that thing without its being seen." We gathered up the broken glass of the gas drippings bottle, and I opened the door. "It's all right now," said Craig, sauntering out before the bar. "Only the next time you has anything the matter, call the company up. I ain't supposed to do this without orders, see?" A moment later I followed, glad to get out of the oppressive atmosphere, and joined him in the back of Vincenzo's drugstore, where he was again at work. As there was no back window there, it was quite a job to lead the wires around the outside from the backyard and in at a side window. It was at last done, however, without exciting suspicion, and Kennedy attached them to an oblong box of weathered oak and a pair of specially constructed dry batteries. "Now," said Craig, as we washed off the stains of work and stowed the overalls back in the suitcase, "that is done to my satisfaction. I can tell Gennaro to go ahead safely now and meet the Black Handers." From Vincenzo's we walked over toward Center Street, where Kennedy and I left Luigi to return to his restaurant, with instructions to be at Vincenzo's at 11:30 that night. We turned into the new police headquarters and went down the long corridor to the Italian bureau. Kennedy sent in his card to Lieutenant Giuseppe in charge, and we were quickly admitted. The lieutenant was a short, full-faced, fleshy Italian, with lightish hair and eyes that were apparently dull until you suddenly discovered that that was merely a cover to their really restless way of taking in everything and fixing it on his mind as if on a sensitive plate. "I want to talk about the Gennaro case," began Craig. "I may add that I have been rather closely associated with Inspector O'Connor of the Central Office on a number of cases, so that I think we can trust each other. Would you mind telling me what you know about it if I promise you that I, too, have something to reveal?" The lieutenant leaned back and watched Kennedy closely without seeming to do so. "When I was in Italy last year," he replied at length, "I did a good deal of work in tracing up some Camorra suspects. I had a tip about some of them to look up their records. I needn't say where it came from, but it was a good one. Much of the evidence against some of those fellows who are being tried at Viterbo was gathered by the Carabinieri as a result of hints that I was able to give them, clues that were furnished to me here in America from the source I speak of. I suppose there is really no need to conceal it, though. The original tip came from a certain banker here in New York." "I can guess who it was," nodded Craig. "Then, as you know, this banker is a fighter. He is the man who organized the White Hand, an organization which is trying to rid the Italian population of the Black Hand. His society had a lot of evidence regarding former members of both of the Camorra in Naples and the Mafia in Sicily, as well as the Black Hand gangs in New York, Chicago, and other cities. Well, Cesare, as you know, is Gennaro's father-in-law. While I was in Naples, looking up the record of a certain criminal, I heard of a peculiar murder committed some years ago. There was an honest old music master who apparently lived the quietest and most harmless of lives. But it became known that he was supported by Cesare, and had received handsome presents of money from him. The old man was, as you may have guessed, the first music teacher of Gennaro, the man who discovered him. One might have been at a loss to see how he could have an enemy, but there was one who coveted his small fortune. One day he was stabbed and robbed. His murderer ran out into the street, crying out that the poor man had been killed. Naturally, a crowd rushed up in a moment, for it was in the middle of the day. Before the injured man could make it understood who had struck him, the assassin was down the street and lost in the maze of old Naples, where he well knew the houses of his friends who would hide him. The man who is known to have committed that crime, Francesco Paoli, escaped to New York. We are looking for him today. He is a clever man, far above the average, son of a doctor in a town a few miles from Naples, went to the university, was expelled for some mad prank. In short, he was the black sheep of the family. Of course, over here, he is too high-born to work with his hands on a railroad or in a trench, and not educated enough to work at anything else. So he has been preying on his more industrious countrymen, a typical case of a man living by his wits, with no visible means of support. Now, I don't mind telling you, in strict confidence," continued the lieutenant, "that it is my theory that old Cesare had seen Paoli here, knew he was wanted for that murder of the old music master, and gave me the tip to look up his record. At any rate, Paoli disappeared right after I returned from Italy, and we haven't been able to locate him since. He must have found out in some way that the tip to look him up had been given by the White Hand. He had been a Camorrista in Italy, and had many ways of getting information here in America." He paused, and balanced a piece of cardboard in his hand. "It is my theory of this case that if we could locate this Paoli, we could save the kidnapping of little Adelina Gennaro very quickly. That's his picture." Kennedy and I bent over to look at it, and I started in surprise. It was my evil-looking friend with the scar on his cheek. "Well," said Craig, quietly handing back the card, "whether or not he is the man, I know where we can catch the kidnappers tonight, Lieutenant." It was Giuseppe's turn to show surprise. "With your assistance, I'll get this man and the whole gang tonight," explained Craig, rapidly sketching over his plan and concealing just enough to make sure that no matter how anxious the lieutenant was to get the credit, he could not spoil the affair by premature interference. The final arrangement was that 4 of the best men of the squad were to hide in a vacant store across from Vincenzo's early in the evening, long before anyone was watching. The signal for them to appear was to be the extinguishing of the lights behind